1 second. I can hear you. Can you could just go to the other room. Thank you. Carry on.
Do we need to go back at all, or
leave that in?
You honestly should leave that in. This is the kind of respect you get around here. You figure if you get 2 Stevens in a room, it would be enough for everyone to clear out and kind of shut up a little bit. Where were we? All right, so I'm Stephen Hale from the Nashville Banner. I'm here with 2 of my colleagues today, Stephen Elliott and Anna Blubaugh, who is our intern for this summer. Anna, this is your first time on the podcast? First time on
any
a podcast.
Wow. Well, I think in the future, everyone will get to be on a podcast for 15 minutes, so this is great to have you. And you're with us for the summer. Let's introduce you to people for a little bit. You're at Belmont, am I right?
Yes, I'm going into my senior year at Belmont. I'm a journalism major with a political science minor.
And you, as far as I can tell, are doing more work than I am since you've gotten here. So thank
Surely
you.
not.
And also, get out of here. So Tuesday night's Metro Council meeting was largely focused on legislation that was motivated by 2 proposed data centers, one of them on the historic Fisk University campus and the other one right next to the Nashville Zoo. Anna, I understand you were out in the crowd talking to am I right, like almost 250 people that showed up?
Yes.
So what was that like? Set the scene for us and tell us what these people were telling you, or how those conversations were.
There were a lot of people who showed up. I will say, compared to the Zoning Planning Commission, I feel like they handled the crowd a little bit better.
At that meeting,
yes. A larger turnout for sure, but they were moving people around for a good bit of it. And so I got to talk to a handful of different people. There were a lot of first-timers, a lot of people who were showing up to a Metro Council meeting for the first time and to talk about data centers for the first time. I asked a lot of people about what specific action they'd like to see Metro take. A lot were in support of the moratorium, but others simply just stated that they would like to see whatever action necessary to get rid of data centers and stop them from being built in their communities.
That's interesting. So, my sense has been that this is drawing out a lot of people who don't normally attend Metro meetings. I mean, Stephen, you and I have talked about this too. Like, that's how it seems. But it's interesting that you talk to people. Did they say more about why this kind of cleared the bar to bring them out of their house on a Tuesday night kind of thing?
Yeah, a lot of them had been thinking about it for a while. The zoo piece was definitely a large motivator. A lot of people mentioned that they had been out of town for the past few weeks, so they didn't get a chance to show up in person. And I think social media reach really motivated a lot of people to come as well.
It's definitely been inescapable if you're on Instagram or social media in Nashville. And Stephen, you'll, I think, find this exciting because we've talked about this a couple times. I watched, for the first time this morning, I watched the council meeting on the Metro Nashville Network app, which I now have on my phone.
Wow.
And it was a good experience, except that only like 2 hours and 45 minutes or 2 hours and 50 minutes of the meeting are on there.
Interesting.
So I then had to switch to YouTube. I don't know if that's just because of the length. In fairness to the MNN folks, I did not go searching around a lot on the app for it. I just was like, well, I'll go to YouTube. So
I'll inquire with my people.
Yeah, but otherwise, very smooth experience. It was great, easy to navigate. Lots of fun. It's our favorite new streaming network.
Do you do like 2x speed or anything like that?
No, I was just doing it, as the Lord intended. Yeah, natural speed, and got to go through a lot of the public hearing. Which I guess maybe before we talk more about that, maybe you can tell us there were 3 bills related to data centers that all these folks were speaking on, either, one or all of those. Can you kind of sum up for us what those are?
Yeah. So there were 3 bills on the public hearing, and then there was a 4th bill also that I'll get to. But so 2 bills linked. It's kind of how these zoning things work, where there'll be the zoning change and then there'll be a separate companion bill that has to do with materials. It's kind of too much to get into, but those are the ones that are originating from Councilmember Rollin Horton, who's the Planning and Zoning Committee chair. And they would set rules for data centers in Nashville's zoning code, which do not exist. So how big they can be, and if they're this big, can they be located near a school or near a transit corridor or near a hospital, all these sensitive sites. Rules about the environmental components in terms of the electricity and the water, And so none of that is in code as it stands. And so they're trying to put that into code. So any future projects are regulated under a set of rules. The other one that was on public hearing is a moratorium, which would pause any permitting for new data centers. However, the moratorium would only be in place until regulations are put in place. So as it stands, they're going to pass on the same night. So the moratorium will never actually go into effect.
Right. It's just kind of a backstop. If the
Yes.
zoning regulations fell apart for some reason, it would pause everything.
And then the fourth bill is the one that the mayor filed, which is the condemnation legislation. It was on first reading. These bills were on second reading out of 3. So it did not have a public hearing, but it ultimately did pass on first reading. This would allow Metro to forcefully acquire the property by the zoo where the DC Blox wants to build a data center. They'll still have to pay for it.
I think that's the most lawyerly I've ever seen you get. Forcefully acquire.
Well, yeah,
it's true. Though.
I've been toying with some different modifiers.
Language.
Yeah,
yeah. And so I was going to ask you about that. When I said 3 bills, I had forgotten about that being a bill. But I do want to talk about the eminent domain stuff because that's another side of this. It also relates to the mayor and DC Blox, this company, getting into kind of a spat.
Contratemps.
Yes. But I wonder if, going back to you real quick, Anna, because you also wrote a story earlier this week about some of the effects of data centers. Stephen mentioned a bunch, and we've talked about them in other episodes or in other stories. There's environmental concerns, and people have concerns about AI and the noise. But you wrote about the electricity in particular. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So Think Tennessee recently released a report just looking at all of the different impacts that data centers have on electricity and power grids, among other issues. But a large portion of it was talking about electricity bills, and they found that households in areas with data centers, households see a higher increase in their electricity bill, whereas companies and utilities see a bit of a decrease, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, and honestly, electricity is still, I view it as like a miracle. I don't really know how it works still, but am I right to say that these data centers have to use so much electricity that's basically the cause of them increasing the bills of people around them, is because they have to use so much power to run?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another really interesting part of the study found that for all of the proposed data centers, as well as the ones that are in operation, the amount of megawattage that they need to use at any point in time combined is the equivalent of 1.3 million households in Tennessee. So a lot of energy being used.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, we've talked about this, but these data centers are varying sizes. Some are huge and some are smaller. And so that varies. So on the public hearing, there were a ton of people. What was the number? At least that signed up, 245 or something like that.
It was almost 250 who signed up. They pulled tickets sort of.
Right. There's a new kind of system in place where people were pulling those tickets because the assumption was this would be a big crowd, and they're trying to keep it orderly, right?
I think they'll do this going forward when they expect there to be a large turnout. So there were a bunch of other public hearings Tuesday night, but they didn't have the same system in place. Usually you just go up and talk when your item comes up. They put this in place to try to keep the line moving and make sure people aren't confused about when to come out of the waiting area and the lobby. And
as a side note for either one of you, I mean, did you think that went pretty smoothly? Or, I mean, I heard some people complaining about it or saying, well, this is better, but it's not. Yeah,
some people were glad that there was a bit of movement in the line. People were continuously going up the stairs or moving around the room. But from my understanding, once you grab a ticket, you can't leave the line and then come back at a later point. You have to stay kind of in that order. And so I talked to a woman who hadn't grabbed a ticket and she just signed up for general public comment because she didn't want to stay in the same place for the whole time. So it was a bit of a give and take.
Yeah.
It did seem to move a lot from my perspective in the front of the room. It seemed to move a lot more smoothly than the budget public hearing a month ago.
Yes.
Which is another really busy one. And there wasn't an order of the line. So it was just sort of like, okay, the next 10 people get up and stand there. And no one really knew who the next 10 people were. So there was some...
Right. So I have several things I want to talk about. Some of them, they're on a spectrum from more substantive to less, because I reserve the right to talk about meaningless stuff on this as well. But during this public hearing, am I right to say I did not hear anyone speak in favor of the data centers? Did I miss? I don't think I caught every speaker, but
I don't think I remember that either. The closest I think it came was people saying, I'm not opposed to technology and innovation. It's just we got to do it the right way. That was the closest anyone came.
Right, and I guess, to be fair, these bills are not. I mean, there's a moratorium bill, but as you explained, that very likely won't go into effect. These bills are just more kind of putting some regulations around them, not saying none of these will exist. So the people supporting those bills aren't necessarily saying, I don't want any of those, although some people did say that.
A lot of people did say there should be none at all.
Yes. There was one gentleman had his public comment took the form of a poem.
I heard at least 3 poems.
Okay, there you go. And then one woman also referred to the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of tensions were high.
There was a Jared Fogle reference.
A Jared Fogle reference. Wow. I must have missed that.
That was late. That was after midnight, I think.
Well, and another thing that was interesting, I want to say it was at just past the 6-hour mark, there was a discussion of whether or not to have a bathroom break.
A bio break.
A bio break. And I was going to ask you about this. Have you ever said the term bio break?
No, and it sort of made me uncomfortable.
Thank you. Same. And I'm glad we can agree on that. Anna, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I don't like that.
I didn't care for it either. But they didn't end up taking one because the vice mayor wanted to keep the meeting moving. Jokes aside about some of these public comments, I do think it made me think that, there's a lot of people you talk to right now, and I've felt this way, where it feels like, okay, the government, whether it's the national government, the local government, is doing things, and I can complain about it, but it's not going to change it. But I mean, it really feels like this is a situation where a thing was announced, or not so much announced as revealed. It kind of became known that this was happening. A ton of people didn't like it, and now it's either not going to happen or it's going to happen in a different way. And it brought out all these people that don't normally come out, and I feel like it's worth just kind of highlighting that.
Well, Rollin Horton and the mayor will both tell you that some of this stuff was in the works before all of the recent attention. However, I think it's obvious that the intense energy that the public has brought to this has elevated the issue and clarified it in public elected officials' minds as sort of a political issue. There's no question.
Yeah. Anna, you're younger than both of us. I'm curious if, obviously for work, we've now sent you to several of these interminable meetings about this, but I'm curious if people that you know through school or people kind of your age, like, is this a topic you think is breaking through there as well, like in your circles that you're seeing?
Absolutely. I saw a handful of people I knew at the Metro Council meeting, as well as the earlier Planning Commission meeting. And once the zoo put out their petition, I think that really took over social media. People who I've never even seen speak out about anything political or anything going on in Nashville were reposting it and signing it. And so I think it's definitely got a lot of younger involvement as well.
Yeah, I'm interested what the kind of after effect of that will be. But, it is interesting that it's brought this many people out. We've talked about the zoo, and the zoo's fight against this has brought out a lot of people, but there's also this data center proposed at Fisk University. Did any of the people in the public comment period bring that up?
Yeah, the zoo has definitely animated a lot of people, but there were a number of people who were Fisk alums or somehow live in the area around Fisk. One of them, Winston Wright, who's been involved in some of the response to the Fisk announcement, said it seems like people here care more about animals than about the people who live around Fisk. So that was a pretty pointed moment.
Right. I want to get back to, there was a message from the mayor
Always a thrill.
Can you tell us what the message basically was? And then I want to kind of talk about the, Freddie versus DC Blox spat that has been going on.
Yeah. So a message from the mayor is not very common. And it's read by the clerk.
Usually not delivered in person by the mayor.
Yes,
either.
usually not. Usually it's a written message that the clerk will read out. And often it will be, here is this boring financial report that we are required to inform you of. And occasionally it will be, tonight is an important night because we are passing the budget and blah, blah, blah. The message on Tuesday was a little bit more, political, fiery. It was kind of fun to hear the clerk read this somewhat aggressive message from the mayor.
It's in a very staid tone, just kind of reading it.
Yeah.
Flatly.
So essentially, he was reiterating his support for the bills that were up, the zoning bill, the moratorium, but also asking them to support his condemnation legislation, which we can get into the late filed nature. But anyway, he needed pretty much everyone to go along with it in order for it to be heard. But he also responded to a statement that DC Blox put out shortly before the meeting, which got a lot of people talking. I was kind of in the little back rooms, and everyone's like, "Did you see this? Did you see this?" And so DC Blox put out a statement. We've linked to it in our recap if you want to go read it. But
and DC Blox, in case we haven't made it clear, is the company behind this data center that is proposed for next to the zoo.
Yes, and they put out a statement saying they'd had these amazing, wonderful conversations with the mayor that the mayor organized, and they've made all this progress on discussions about the data center, and it made me raise my eyebrow when I saw it. It seemed like a pointed message. I felt saying. Well, anyway, I'll just get on to the responses. So the mayor quickly put out a statement saying this is a bunch of baloney.
Malarkey even.
Yeah, I can't remember his exact phrases, but it was pretty clear that he said... It was pretty clear that he said this was a mischaracterization of what happened. Yes, there was a meeting, but we're moving forward with what's in the best interest of Metro, which is acquiring this land. Mm-hmm. All the zoo people were also at the meeting, and so I talked to Butch Spiriton, who longtime Metro watchers will know well, but he is now the chair of the zoo board, and he was in the back, and I said, "Did you see this?" And so he talked to me. He's like, "Yeah, we met. It was cordial, but we're nowhere near any kind of progress. There's no middle ground between our two positions. Our position is we don't want this here, and their position is we want this here.
You have to let us put it here, yeah."
So in the zoo's case, there's no middle ground between those two positions. So that was a pretty interesting little spat.
Yeah, and so the mayor has come out recently and said that, yeah, they're going to try to use eminent domain to take over this land, which, yeah, as you said, without getting into legal particulars, just essentially means we're going to take this because we're saying the city needs this. And it needs it to a degree that clears the bar of us just being able to claim the land, which, a lot of people don't like. Businesses don't like. DC Blox is, resistant to. Where does that stand right now, and where might it be going?
Yeah, so the legislation that would allow the mayor to move forward with that passed on in first reading, so there'll need to be two more readings, so presumably that could pass in early August, which would then begin an additional process where if between now and then, Metro and DC Blox could come to some agreement between now and then, which actually we should go back and say, at least at this moment, I do not believe DC Blox actually owns the property. They have an agreement to purchase the property from Market Street, which is a local real estate developer. So effectively, they will be the owner, so they have an interest in this property, but they're not currently the owner. But between now and August, Metro and DC Blox could negotiate, like, let's just do this out of court if you're going to do it anyway. Here, you can pay us this amount of money. Mm-hmm. The city does have to pay fair market value, so that is up for debate. And, we saw with the Music City Center, which was kind of the last big time that this was a really big issue here, when the city was trying to build the Music City Center, there were some properties in the footprint that they needed, and there was a big fight over how much they were worth that ended up in court. And so obviously the city says it's only worth this much, and the owner says, no, it's worth this much, and then a court comes in, or a mediator of some sort, and says it's worth whatever.
Right.
So, yes. The mayor has said there are several things that this property could be used for. There is a large metro presence in the southeast area already. And there is, according to the mayor's office, a need for various departments, NDOT, fire department, different, I can't remember some of the other ones that have been named, but he said they've been looking for office space in that area for a while, and this is the best available, and they need it.
Mm-hmm. I'm about to yield our time here and let everyone go, but Anna, as we said, you've gone to 2 of these. You've probably heard as much discussion of data centers as any of us on staff, or maybe anyone else. I'm curious, what of the public response, has anything kind of stood out in your mind that you kind of recall as a main theme from this? You mentioned the zoo has animated a lot of the resistance, and that makes sense. A lot of people have memories from the zoo, and they have a big audience of people seeing their resistance. But I'm just curious if anything else has stood out to you.
I feel like a big theme in what everyone was saying was mostly geared around community and protecting community spaces. There was a demonstration outside of Metro Courthouse yesterday, and it was a few groups put on, No New Data Centers, PSL, and I think the group that Big Dumb Hole opposes the Tesla tunnel.
The boring
yes,
tunnel.
Yeah. And a lot of their chants were geared around, there was a really good one. It was public land for you and me, not for Grok or ChatGPT. And a few solidarity union songs. Yeah. And so I feel like a lot of people are obviously there's a lot of talk about the environmental impacts as well, but just protecting community spaces, I think, was a big theme and motivator for bringing people out and getting involved.
Well, thank you for your work on this. Stephen, thank you as always for losing sleep to bring us news from the Metro Council. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll send this data off to some place where it's stored for you to hear. Our producer is Andrea Tudhope. You can subscribe to the Banner & Company feed and listen to all our podcasts there. See ya.